turn did I start?
Well, good evening, or good afternoon, rather, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Shaw Auditorium for the Committee of the Whole meeting, Monday, July the 21st, 2014. And I'll call the special open council meeting to order, and we'll see, Mr. Ferrero, if there's any late items, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yeah, there's three. Item 8H, Island Pallet Solutions, termination of lease and demolition of improvements. We're changing the lease termination date to 2014, September 30th. And also we add in a delegation, Mr. Fernando Costa. In item 8I, 2014 reserves, we add the presentation for Mr. Brian Clemens, Director of Finance. And under 17, procedural motion, we add in sections 91A and 91G of the Community Charter.
Okay, thank you. Now, I just wanted to point out that we do have, but barely, a quorum. We need 5, and Councillor Brennan just arrived, and so we do have a quorum, but we have obviously 4 people missing or away for various reasons. So, but we do have a quorum and we can continue. So we'll ask staff if they, Council, if someone would move the motion for the adoption of the agenda as amended.
So, Your Worship, one more item. Since it's going to be only 5 people, I believe you're going to declare yourself in a conflict on the Landsville water. We're probably going to be removing that from the agenda, unfortunately. So it'll be up in the next council meeting.
Okay.
So if you want to just go ahead and do that change right now, we can make the changes to the agenda.
Well, I think we should, because I might as well do it before I leave. So.
Okay, Worship, then I'll make the motion that we defer the Landsville music water agreement update until the next council meeting when we have a quorum present.
Move in second. Discussion. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. So move into the motion for the adoption of the minutes as circulated. Second. All those in favor? Opposed? So our first presentation, Dr. David Whitty, the chair of the South Downtown Waterfront Committee, to provide a presentation regarding the next steps for the South Downtown Waterfront Initiative.
Your Worship, I'm just putting my phone on silent.
Sorry. Okay.
Sorry. Thank you.
And Your Worship, in the mayor's report, you wanted to mention something?
Yes, a couple of things I will mention, and under there, just brief ones. I'd like to comment on the very, very successful BC Summer Games 2014 here in Nanaimo, and also another item on the agenda that will be discussed following Dr. Whitty. Welcome, Dr. Whitty.
Thank you, Your Worship. I have a formal presentation tonight, no PowerPoint, and bear your indulgence as I refer to some notes.
Great.
Thank you. As chair of the South Downtown Waterfront Initiative Committee, I'm here tonight to follow up on the work of the committee and to report back to council as requested. You will recall that following the committee's reporting and presentation to council on January 27th, the committee was asked to meet with the other 3 key stakeholders: the Nanaimo Port Authority, Regional District of Nanaimo, and Sunaimo First Nation. As chair and with the assistance of Bill Corson, I presented the committee's work and recommendations to the NPA on March 11th, the RDN on March 28th, and the SFN on June 28th. I will also speak to so I will report back on what was heard there. And I will also speak to what the committee and I believe are key next steps. First of all, feedback from the 3 meetings. Overall, there was positive feedback from all 3 organizations. The NPA board expressed appreciation for the opportunity to engage in the South Downtown Waterfront Initiative Committee deliberations as a key stakeholder. The board agreed that the South Downtown Waterfront Initiative offered the Port Authority and City unprecedented opportunities to reshape the city and the Port Lands. There was an expressed desire to further explore such opportunities in a mutually respectful dialogue. The RDN appreciated being informed about the work. There were no major comments. Tsunamic First Nation Chief and Council expressed appreciation for being informed of the work. I noted that there had been a decision by the previous Chief and Council to withdraw from participation on the committee, but that all committee meeting minutes had been sent to the First Nation. Chief and Council appreciated the reference and acknowledgement within the documents about the implications of the Douglas Treaty and associated rights that will influence any long-term development considerations. Council expressed appreciation for the important role that the SFN will need to play in partnership with the city and others. But there was concern expressed about the need to ensure that Tsunamic First Nation involvement was real and meaningful and not cosmetic. The importance of the Douglas Treaty and its implications for future decision-making was reiterated. It was a message I was asked to convey to you today. I'd like to refresh your mind and memory on two matters that actually were tabled before you, and I'd like to actually read them as point of record. The first is a message from the committee, because I think our letter of transmittal captures quite nicely some of the key recommendations. The committee has encouraged a transparent and community-based process that has led to the Framing the Future technical report, and this report, Framing the Future Vision and Guiding Principles. Framing the Future identifies an important city building opportunity for Nanaimo, one that is unparalleled in the city's history. That opportunity must be seized and acted upon. The committee believes this process has opened up a community dialogue that deserves further nurturing. Tsunamic First Nation is a key partner of the areas to achieve its full success. And the committee urges the city to continue to engage the First Nation in discussions related to the area. Likewise, the Port Authority and adjacent neighborhoods have significant interests in the development of the area. Their continued involvement in discussions that foster mutual benefits will be critical to the successful transition of the South Downtown waterfront. While the vision and guiding principles present a framework for the long-term development of the area, the committee is cognizant of the implications of immediate needs and near-term opportunities that may impact the site. The committee urges the City of Nanaimo to articulate planning and design over the immediate and near-term that does not compromise the promise of the area. Given the apparent potential development of several initiatives over the near term, including the transit hub and the fast ferries, the committee believes that a group should be tasked with transitioning, framing the future, and monitoring short-term initiatives. The potential is far too significant to be lost on near-term actions that do not address long-term needs. One other issue, not explicit in the South Downtown Waterfront Initiative mandate, requires some critical thinking. The notion of a structure for ongoing planning and development management. In many jurisdictions, a specifically mandated public development corporation has been created to implement the public policy of council or a group of like-minded stakeholders related to a special site. Think of the Boston Redevelopment Authority, the Toronto Harbourfront, Granville Island, Winnipeg's North Portage, the Forks, and Centreventure as examples. The City of Nanaimo may wish to explore how a similar management structure that includes key partners like the Port Authority and Tsunamic First Nation could be created to guide the development of the South Downtown waterfront. The purpose of such an entity would be to provide a mechanism for implementing the redevelopment of the South Downtown waterfront area through a combination of investments by the Development Corporation itself, the private sector, public agencies, institutions, and governments. By being somewhat at arm's length from the city, this entity could be more businesslike with its real estate assets, maximizing returns, seeking out business partnerships and funding, and managing its risks in the real estate marketplace, all in the context of higher-order public policy measures. Lastly, the committee encourages the city to explore the development of a charter for the implementation of the vision and guiding principles. The charter could inform the work of the entity responsible for the planning and design of the development of the area. Cities such as Auckland and Seattle have charters that might inform those discussions. Such a charter brings to bear notions of community ownership, expectations, and measurements. Such a charter could form the basis for a commitment to open, transparent decision-making and accountability. And the last item I'd like to read from our vision and guiding principles is what we described as a special opportunity, and I'd like that in the record as well. Nanaimo's harbor and associated waterfront offers a significant opportunity to initiate and fulfill an unprecedented mandate: the development of appropriate and complementary land uses that foster community, cultural, economic, environmental, and social well-being. Nanaimo has a chance to create a harbor and waterfront with a legacy that is celebrated for and by future generations. This area can be transformational for Nanaimo and the region. It can and should be a place that becomes known locally, regionally, and nationally for being authentic, bold, economically viable, enduring, inclusive, progressive, resilient, restorative, socially just, and timeless. In particular, engagement with the Snuneymuxw First Nation to explore mutual, common, and collaborative ambitions could provide an enhanced common purpose while being respectful of the unique Snuneymuxw culture. The harbor and waterfront provide an unprecedented opportunity for respectful and fruitful sharing of both ambitions and rewards. The harbor and waterfront are critical to the future well-being of Nanaimo. No other area will define the city in the same way with the same effect. Cities that have recognized the significant roles of their waterfronts are considered leaders in economic, environmental, and social sustainability, and are places of international recognition and attention. Nanaimo should aspire to nothing less. Chairing the South Downtown Waterfront Initiative Committee has been an honor and privilege. Thank you for allowing me to help contribute to what is unquestionably Nanaimo's greatest city-building opportunity. It is an opportunity that we must get right. It is an opportunity that has the potential to be Nanaimo's 21st century legacy. It has the opportunity that requires demands, concerted effort, and attention. It is an opportunity that requires unprecedented vision, commitment, and leadership. There are few cities in Canada left with such a unique city-building opportunity. Many have recognized similar opportunities and created legacy projects that have shaped their urban fabric forever. Halifax Harbour, Toronto Keys, Thunder Bay Waterfront, which is just evolving, some lessons learned there, Winnipeg Forks Development, Saskatoon Downtown Waterfront, Vancouver Falls Creek, and possibly, in that list, Nanaimo South Downtown Waterfront. Think about that, Nanaimo South Downtown Waterfront, as part of that group of cities who have committed to leaving a legacy of high-quality waterfront and urban development. Two of the South Downtown Waterfront Committee members have experienced firsthand the possibilities of a successful waterfront strategy. Doug Kelsick, who's here tonight, and myself, having both been involved and watched the evolution of Winnipeg's project take shape out of industrial and railroad lands into a premier, nationally recognized urban area. All that started in the mid-'70s, a long time ago, Doug, right? Through a partnership of city and provincial interests, and ultimately led to the creation of the Forks Renewal Corporation that has successfully, carefully, and strategically created a vibrant urban setting. After 40 years, the final pieces are now being planned and designed to complete the redevelopment with mixed-use residential development. Doug and I, and for that matter the whole committee, believe that there are important lessons worth considering as Nanaimo reflects on next steps for the South Downtown Waterfront Initiative. I'll give you three. First and foremost, there must be a commitment to the vision and guiding principles developed by the community for the community. Developed by the community for the community. They are before you in the committee's work. The work of the community expressed through the committee must be honored. Secondly, there must be continued energy directed toward a commitment for action. Tabling our work will not suffice. The community has expressed its desire to shape its future on the waterfront so that future generations benefit from the vision of today. On behalf of those future generations, I thank you for your support of the committee's work and the foresight to recognize the possibilities. Thirdly, as expressed in the committee's letter referenced earlier, there must be a concerted effort as well to ensure that this legacy opportunity is managed and developed in a strategic and careful way. It is the committee's view and my view that a development corporation should be created with the mandate to manage the development of the Southwest Downtown Initiative through a partnership of key stakeholders, notably SFN and NPA. This is a crucial, challenging idea. It is one that others have used successfully to shape the future of key urban lands. It is one that the community, the waterfront, and future generations deserve. So, where from here? The city must take a proactive leadership role in ensuring that this opportunity is not lost, that the future is ensured and secured. The committee members have expressed their interest in assisting and advising the city on next steps. The committee is mindful that there are many competing interests for council's and staff's time and energy. The committee believes it can help by providing advice, exploring development corporation options, and offering additional detailed recommendations in an unbiased way. Without overstating the obvious, you have before you an unprecedented opportunity, a legacy opportunity that will affect the long-term well-being of Nanaimo at a scale and impact that will shape our collective future. A city-building opportunity that could inspire, I had to get that word in, that could inspire and reward in as yet unknown ways. The committee asks that you accept its offer to carry on to explore the next steps that are required to secure that future. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Whitty. I just want to say on behalf of council, how much we appreciate the work that you and the committee put in. And, with all the outstanding achievements that you've realized at BIU and certainly within the community in many other capacities, I think the finished product is really an incredible document and one we certainly will value. And I think that if there was any slacking off on the part of Councillor Patchy, I think, who was a strong proponent of and very supportive of all the work that went into it, would unceasingly remind us that more had to be done on it. So having said that, and thanking you again for that, I'll turn it over. I think Councillor Patchy has a comment to make.
Thank you, Worship. Thank you, Dr. Whitty, very much. So it's action time, right? I'll be honest with you. I asked staff before I came today or yesterday, what is it that I should be doing today? And since nobody knew exactly what you were going to say, I didn't get any advice. So let's ask you for some advice. The committee, as we know it now, would you envision that committee, possibly in a smaller version, as the first item of business to make sure that whatever happens from this point on does not interfere with the future plans?
I think that that's the key important step to keep movement, and the committee is obviously has the means to carry on with its past work. I'm not sure about the composition of the committee. We've got key stakeholders. I'm not sure. They may defer not to, or they may want to participate. But I think it would be really helpful if council were to pass a motion to request the committee to carry on to provide advice to council and staff on emerging matters and advice on what appropriate development corporation or development entity options might exist to explore and bring some recommendations, alternatives.
I'd be pleased to make such a motion. I can do it now, Your Worship, or do we wait till everybody's had a chance to
We'll
ask?
wait till everyone has a chance, then we'll come back to you
Well,
for the
then,
motion.
if I can just get back to Dr. Whitty on the other two portions, the Development Corporation and the Charter. Could that be done in a separate way by, say, for instance, us going to staff and ask them to report to us on that, or how would you envision that was brought to bear if we could?
Well, I think staff obviously have the capability to do that. I think given that we've put that idea forward, given that at least two of us have worked very closely within that kind of framework and have experience. Might be helpful for the committee to work with staff to bring forward, as we've done with this previous work, for council's consideration. I think there's those options need to be explored in with some rigor and detail.
By the committee.
Pardon me?
By the committee.
Well, I think given what we've done, it's no disrespect to staff, but I think we have the horses, we have the interest, we've explored that initially, and have the background. It seems to me that would be the place to start.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Johnstone.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you, Dr. Whitty, and thank you for your offer to carry on the committee's great work. You mentioned about framing a committee. You're considering the same committee, or you mentioned as being an arm's length committee, a separate corporation?
Well, I wonder, what I would offer is that the existing committee members be asked to sit and see how that plays out. There certainly, in that letter of transmittal, and I haven't canvassed them, in the last couple of months, but in the letter of transmittal, we all agreed that the committee had interest in carrying on. Now, it may be, and I don't want to put words in the mouths of some of the members, some may decline for whatever reasons, but let's see how that plays out.
And your presentation tonight is very timely, as there's two items on the agenda this evening which really pertain to that development, the pallet lease renewal or non-renewal, and the environmental studies. And of course,
Right.
You've been following the council's contracts with the ferry, so it's proceeding slowly, but it's going to be wonderful to have an action committee to carry on that work. So thank you.
And I would say that. My experience is that, this was a committed group of people, obviously a very talented group bringing forward the work that was brought forward, and I think it's helpful to, when you have people of that caliber who are interested, to make use. The other challenge, I think, in sites like this, and we allude to it again in the letter, is, there can be some incremental moves. But those moves they need to be strategic, and perhaps another set of eyes can help ensure that that's the case.
Well, your expertise is greatly appreciated. Thank you.
Good. I see no further questions at this point. And, Councillor Patrick, before we do,
Well,
I was going to call on you.
if this is the point,
No, just
then
one-
where I could make...
Well, just wait one sec. I'm just going to make a quick comment, then you'll make the motion, and then we'll go. I just want to say
once I have
that I
some
hope when your committee, or if it's subcommittee that it's struck, I hope also that Doug Kelsix, who's in the audience with us today, will find the time to sit on it. Doug is also a very important member of the committee and highly respected businessman in Nanaimo, and I know he will also be in a position to add some good advice. So no pressure, Doug, but but keep it in mind anyway.
Doug is keen on this idea.
All right.
Well, that's good. No.
Okay, now I will
Councillor
need
Patrick.
some help with the wordsmithing of the motion that sort of puts Dr. Whitty's perfect language into something short. Did you make notes while he spoke?
Yes, Your Worship. I can take a crack at it and see how it goes.
You saw?
So my understanding of the motion is it was the council directs staff to request the South Downtown Waterfront Committee to continue to provide advice to council, and that the existing committee members be asked to sit on the committee.
And
So what, if you may add and ask perhaps that we draft a terms of reference to bring back for approval?
okay,
And that we draft a transfer reference to be brought back for approval.
I so move.
Moving second. Discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Unanimous.
Okay, thank you very
That's
much.
it. Thank you, Dr.
And I might say that we very much look forward to continuing to working with staff, because the staff have been so helpful through this whole process.
Well, I appreciate hearing that, and it's a wonderful site, 27.7 acres, I think it is, and it's so important for so many groups moving forward. SFN in particular have an interest in it, and it won't be lost. We're going to continue on, and thank you again for your contribution.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
The next item is the Mayor's Report, and I just want to shout out a huge thank you to all the volunteers that were involved in what I consider to be an outstanding BC Summer Games here in Nanaimo 2014. To me, the numbers were almost mind-boggling. We had 3,000 athletes, we had 3,000 volunteers, and on the opening presentations on Friday, it was suggested there were some 8,000 people that were in the crowds, and it just was an overwhelming success. And so many people contributed so much to the success of the games. But, you know, on our side, of course, Councillor Diana Johnson, who's on my left, put in huge shifts. And I'm hesitant to just point out one person because so many people did so much. But I couldn't go to an event that Councillor Johnson wasn't there and participating, helping out where she could behind the scenes. And I just think it speaks volumes of what the city has tried to contribute from our part. But I know staff also had a huge role to play in it. And Marilyn Smith, who's Secretary to Mayor and Council, I think had 2 morning shifts that started at 5:45, something like that in the morning, and not once, but she did it 2 mornings in a row. And forgive me, Marilyn, but you still look tired today. Anyway, it was a lot of work, and it was just something I'm so proud of everyone who contributed, and her honor, the Governor General, Lieutenant Governor, I beg your pardon, BC was in attendance, and she was really over the moon with all of the activities and what she saw. So Nanaimo did itself proud, and a big thank you to everyone. Now, I also have, under the Mayor's Report, item B, before we proceed with the agenda, I wish to note that the notice of motion presented at the July 14th Open Council meeting was assessed with the benefit of legal input, and it was deemed that this motion belongs on the agenda of an in-camera meeting under Section 90(1)A, C, I, and G of the Community Charter. A resolution to include the above notice of motion on today's in-camera meeting agenda will be made and voted on at the end of this open meeting as per item 17. So with that, we'll move on to number 8, Corporate Services, 8A, Development Permit DP 886 at 6057 Dumont Road. Purpose to obtain council authorization to issue an amendment to approved development permit DP 702 issued 2011 February 28th in order to revise phases 3 and 4 for the construction of 27 remaining multi-family units with 1 newly proposed variance. And the motion is there. Councillor Brennan, would you like to?
Yeah, I would move the staff recommendation that council authorize an amendment to development permit number DP 702 at 6057 Dumont Road to include following variances: to reduce the front yard setback to 4.71 meters, to reduce the rear yard setback to 5.17 meters, and to allow a projection of open decks into the side yards.
I'll second that.
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion on that? All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. The item B, Nanaimo Yacht Club waterfront walkway upgrade.
Going to do this.
The purpose is to obtain council approval to enter into a letter of intent with the Nanaimo Yacht Club's proposal to expand the waterfront walkway as required under the lease agreement with the Nanaimo Port Authority. Staff recommendation is in 2 parts. That motion that 1, council enter into a letter of intent with the Nanaimo Yacht Club to upgrade the waterfront walkway as outlined in the document, and 2, consider adding the project to the 2015-2019 capital plan during this year's budget deliberations. What's your pleasure on that? Councillor Brennan, did you want to move that?
Sure.
Okay.
I'll move that.
Second.
It's moved and seconded. Discussion. Councillor Patchy.
Just a question to staff, if I may. Would all this be paid for with PILT money that we received from the NPA over the years?
Mr. Corsons?
Yes, that's the intention.
Okay, thank you.
Any further discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Item C, summary of cash in lieu of parkland dedication. Reports authorized by Council for 2014. Purpose to provide Council with a summary of contributions for the cash in lieu of parkland and dedication of parkland through subdivision for a period 2013 July 01 to 2014 July 01. And the motion is to receive the information.
So moved, Your Worship.
Moved. Second. Discussion? No. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. And the new provincial liquor policy changes. purpose is to inform council of recent changes to provincial liquor licensing policy as a result of British Columbia liquor policy review. And again, the recommended motion is to receive for information.
So moved.
Moved. Second. Questions? All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Changes to regulations permitting viable pricing and imposing minimum drink prices in licensed establishments. Business License Amendment Bylaw 2014 number 5351.11. Purpose is to obtain council approval to amend the business license bylaw to reflect new recent changes to the liquor control and licensing branch policies by eliminating the regulatory function of minimum drink pricing in the city.
So moved, Your Worship.
Moved. Second. Councillor Graves.
No, no,
Oh, okay.
recommendation or bylaw or whatever.
Okay. Well, we'll still let you do it. It's been moved and seconded. Do you want to go ahead for it?
Oh, no, we
Okay.
have to
So
receive.
it's been moved and seconded, and the motion is what we're voting on now. All those in favor? Opposed? Now, the bylaw, Councillor McKay, did you want to do that one?
McKay,
Councillor Friend, come on, I looked right at you. Councillor Greaves, I'm sorry.
I had a haircut too. Bylaw, the Business License Amendment Bylaw 2014 number 5351.11 to eliminate the regulatory function for minimum drink pricing by the city pass first reading.
Moved and seconded. Discussion. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries.
That
And
the Business License Amendment Bylaw 2014 number 5351.11 pass second reading.
second. All those in favor? Opposed?
And
Thank
the
you,
business-
Councillor Greaves. Oh, sorry.
The Business License Amendment Bylaw 2014 number 5351.11 pass third reading.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Moving into the 2014 Grants Advisory Committee recommendations, permissive tax exemption requests, and these are to be introduced by Grants Advisory Committee Chair, Councillor Johnstone.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'd like to move the committee's recommendation to award a permissive tax exemption for the 2015 tax year pending that construction starts on or before 2014 September 10th to the Nanaimo Travelers Lodge Society PTE 01. And Your Worship, staff will be monitoring that construction date.
Okay, just to staff, if I could, do we want this? Do we need this seriatim, or can we do this as a block?
Your Worship, you could do this as a block if you prefer, or seriatim. Either way is
As
fine.
a block then, Your Worship? Okay, deny that the Nanaimo Travelers Lodge Society's request to be reimbursed for their 2014 property taxes. Award a permissive tax exemption for the 2015 tax year to the Nanaimo Affordable Housing Society, PTE 03, and award a permissive tax exemption for the 2015 tax year to the Harbour City Theatre Alliance, PTE 04.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Discussion? All.
I have a
Go ahead.
question.
Yeah.
And that'll be a question to staff with regards to number 4 for the Harbour City Theatre Alliance. Would the same permissive tax exemption have existed for the previous occupant, that being the Centre for the Arts Nanaimo? So this is not in addition to what we gave.
That's correct, Your Worship. This building has been exempt from taxes as long as it's been used as a performing arts theatre.
Thank you.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Over to unresolved building deficiencies, notice untitled, section 5.7. It's requested that council hear anyone wishing to speak with respect to unresolved building deficiencies for the properties listed below. Staff recommendation, the motion, the council by resolution instruct the corporate officer to file a bylaw contravention notice respecting the properties listed below at the Land Title and Survey Authority of British Columbia under section 5.7 of the Community Charter. There are 7 of them. I believe they're all still applicable. And the first one is 213 Bird Sanctuary Drive, authorization of a secondary suite. Anyone in attendance would like to speak to that matter? The second is 443 Hillcrest Avenue, authorization for a secondary suite. Anyone in attendance would like to speak to that item? The third is 2838 Nayland Road, illegal secondary suite. Anyone in attendance would like to speak to that property? The fourth, 560 Nova Street, authorization of a secondary suite. Anyone in attendance would like to speak to the Nova Street address? The next is 119 Wildlife Place, authorization of a secondary suite. Anyone like to speak to that matter? And the number 6 item is 515 Milton Street, incomplete construction permit required. Anyone in attendance that would like to speak to matters related to 515 Milton Street? And the final one is 3168 Uplands Drive, outstanding deficiencies permit required. Anyone in attendance tonight that would like to speak to matters related to 3168 Uplands Drive? Seeing none? Okay, move in second. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Moving into Island Pallet Solutions Limited, termination of lease and demolition of the improvements. Purpose to obtain council approval to terminate the current month-to-month lease with Island Pallet Solution Limited and to demolish the existing improvements in advance of the redevelopment of the city-owned property at 1 Port Place Drive. And we start with the delegation. Mr. Fernando Costa. Mr. Costa, are you in attendance tonight? Okay, then moving on to that, the not here. Everyone's looking at everyone else, but nobody sees Mr. Costa. So, staff recommendation is the motion that Council 1 direct staff to advise Island Pellet Solution Limited that its lease will terminate effective 2014 September 30th, and 2 direct staff to issue a tender to demolish the existing building and improvements. We can do 1 and 2 together, or do you need them, Sir Adam? Okay, would anyone so moved? And second, no discussion. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. 1 Port Place. Oh, I'm sorry. 1 Port Drive, rather. Request for qualifications for environmental services. The purpose is to provide council with an update on the request for qualifications that was issued for environmental services on a city-owned parcel of land at 1 Port Drive. And the motion is that council receive for information the report.
I'll move that.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. And strategic plan implementation progress, purpose to provide information on the progress of implementing the corporate strategic plan. And there's a motion applicable for that.
Move, Your Worship, that council receive for information the report regarding strategic plan implementation progress.
Is there a seconder? Thank you. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Now, the next item is the Lancefield Water Agreement update. And at this point, I declare...
Your Worship, it's been pulled from the agenda.
Oh, I'm sorry, it has to. Sorry. I should have crossed it out when it was announced. I beg your pardon.
And Your Worship, just to note that we still have no quorum to deal with that issue. There's just to make a note that if you step out of the room right now, we will have no quorum. That's why we're striking that from the
Yes.
agenda. Yeah.
And the minutes will show that. Okay. The 2014 reserves to be introduced by Mr. Clements, Director of Finance, and the purpose is to provide council with information on reserves. Mr. Clements.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thanks, Derek. So this is a presentation that I've actually done a version of every year for the past 2 or 3 years. And I'll try to make it fairly quick because for council, a lot of this is a reminder rather than new information for you. This supports the report that's on the agenda and the detailed financial information that's on the agenda in terms of what's in the reserve balances. And it's a bit of a lead up in a way to talking about the budget later on this fall, because one of the things that we consider when we're putting together the budget is how much money we have available to spend and what it's available for. So one of the things to start with is some basic introduction as to what are reserves and what can they be used for. And when we talk about reserves at the staff level, we're generally talking about 2 different kinds of reserves. There's statutory reserve funds, which are created as part of legislation, so they follow the community charter. So they're created by bylaw. They can only be spent on the purposes which are included in the bylaw, and you can only use them for those purposes unless that purpose no longer exists, in which case you can transfer it to another reserve for capital purposes if that transfer is done by bylaw and the money is not required for its original purpose. And that, for the first time, we're actually going to request council's approval to go ahead and do that with one of our reserves. As part of this, I would also include development cost charges. So as council's familiar with, development cost charges is money that's paid by developers at the time of development. It's held in reserve and it must be spent on the projects that are specified in the DCC bylaws. So some examples of the statutory reserves are the community works funds, the gas tax revenues that we get from the federal government. We must put in a reserve. That reserve was created by bylaw. We can only use it to spend on projects that are qualified under the community works fund. We do this, a more self-generated kind of fund is the facility development fund, which we've talked about before. So there's a bit of a surplus on some kinds of admission revenues Parks and Rec facilities. That money is put into a reserve and is used to keep those facilities and to develop them. The most recent one we created this year was the Asset Management Reserve, so money we put aside specifically for asset management projects. The other kind of reserves that the city has are what are more appropriately referred to as reserve accounts. So they are not created by any kind of legislation. There's no bylaw. So what happens is typically money is taken from unspent money in previous years. Sometimes it represents a project that's simply been incomplete at the end of the year and be completed in the following year. We refer to that as work in progress, and I think that starting next year we're going to do some work to make that a little bit more clear to council and the public exactly what projects are in progress. Sometimes it comes from a dedicated revenue, and parking is a really good example of that. So we collect money from off-street parking and on-street parking. It goes into a reserve and it's spent on downtown parking. Most of these reserves are committed to future expenditures. They're not going into a pot of money and staying there. In other cases, some of these reserves are contingencies. So we'll put aside some money in case something happens, and we have reserves for claims that are not for which we are not insured. We have some reserves set aside in case we have large property tax that we can't collect and that we aren't able to collect through tax sale. So how much money is in reserve? This is the opening balance for 2014, which is exactly the closing balance if you look at our financial statements for 2013. So the first category talked about statutory reserve funds, those that were restricted by bylaw. They can only, there's about $19.6 million. We have about $38 million for various kinds of development cost charges, and the remaining $62 million are in reserve accounts. The total for all reserves at the end of 2013 was around $120 million. Attached to the report is a detailed reserve listing. It contains a list of every reserve, the actual opening balance, some notes on what we would propose to use it for, and maybe some history as well. I've included in that a color coding of the kinds of reserves and the restriction of use, and this is what that coding looks like. That varies depending on whether I think it's restricted, like those that are developed by bylaw, to unallocated or allocated, and the colors don't show up great on here, but they're fairly clear in the report. One thing I want to make clear is this classification you'll not find anywhere in any accounting manual. This is strictly I've lumped these into these groups for council's discussion, and some things actually could fall into more than one category, or we could argue about the categories. But I think it just makes it easier for council to see what we've put money aside for and what it can be used for. So there's some reserves are unique. For example, we have a cemetery care reserve, which is created by a completely other set of legislation, which we can't use for anything other than perpetual care on the cemetery. The listing also has some check marks that indicates which reserves we think are for asset renewal. And we took these reserves into account when we were creating the asset management plan. We were assuming that this money would be part of the money that will be spent over the next 20 years to renew our assets. One of the things that's also done is that many of these reserves, because these are based on opening balances, some of these reserves have been reassigned and they've been depleted to fund the Lindley Valley purchase, and those notes are available on the listing. So just if you look at those categories, you'll see that the majority of those reserves are restricted. They can only be used for certain purposes. So those are the ones created by law and the DCCs. Most of them have some specific use that if we didn't use them for that, there would be repercussions. For example, all the water projects, we wouldn't propose to use money we collected from water to fund a general revenue project. And at the end of the day, there is actually no money there are no reserves that are unallocated at all. Sorry, that's not true. There's $1.4 million remaining in general capital. And one of the things I guess I would caution is that none of these reserves have been set aside for work on Colliery Dam. So we have not put our mind to funding Colliery Dam. We said that that's something that we would bring forward in a future report to council. So what are these reserves used for? We use them, as I said, to carry from one year to the next for contingencies. We also use them to accumulate funds for things like property and park acquisition. Right now we have virtually no money in any reserve for property or park acquisition. We expended that when we bought Lindley Valley. We also use it to accumulate funds for large projects that couldn't be financed in a single year, so like the water treatment plant. So in effect, what that does a little bit is it spreads costs over more than 1 year. We also use them for funds for specific purposes like the Facility Development Fund or parking, where we want to target specific revenues to specific expenditures. And all in all, the using reserve funds has the effect of smoothing tax increases over the years and reducing reliance on debts. Reserves would be a fairly important part of any pay-as-you-go kind of approach to budgeting. I think everybody's aware of a lot of projects we've done. Any major project we've done in Nanaimo over the past 25 years that I know of has had at least some reserve component. Most of these projects would not have proceeded if we hadn't been able to set money aside in reserves. Again, the impact of funding Lindley Valley was that about $8 million came out of reserve funds and accounts. There was about 16 miscellaneous reserve accounts that were reallocated and closed. And frankly, this is a process we go through about every 5 years or so, is that money gets set aside to a reserve. For whatever reason, that project doesn't proceed or becomes less important. So it becomes fairly important every 5 years or so to go through and review whether those reserves are still needed for what they were set aside for. We used a lot. We went through a similar process when we built this building, for example, and we took money out of little pockets and used them to fund this building. So the question that we get asked every year is, why don't we use reserves to reduce taxes? And I can only say that we do. The 2014 budget alone contains $15 million in funding from general fund reserves, plus an additional $8 million in sewer and $27 million in water. If we had not been taking this money out of reserves, property taxes would be 16% higher in 2014. One of the other things that reserves does is that general fund reserves, things that aren't allocated through bylaw, we put that interest into general funds revenues. So we added $1.2 million in 2013 from interest revenue on reserves. That's slightly more than 1% in taxes. I remember mentioning this years ago to a council member back when interest rates were higher and we were getting 8 and 9% returns instead of 2% returns, and his answer was, we should put more money in reserves so we don't have to raise taxes at all. So for some people that isn't enough. They want to know, why aren't we using them to further reduce taxes? So why do we just use them to fund projects? Why don't we just reduce our operating costs? And you can do that, and it would provide current year tax relief. But unless you assign the same amount of money every year forever, eventually that tax increase would catch up to you. So if you were to say, I'll take $1 million and reduce taxes by 1% this year, you're automatically guaranteeing that you're going to need to either spend that $1 million again next year, or you need to raise taxes by that 1%. So it's something you can do for the short term. That's not something that you can do for a long period of time. One thing I've never mentioned in the past when doing this is we do have other things which aren't technically reserves, but we think of them, council probably thinks of them the same way. And one of those things is the Port Pilts that we talked about earlier tonight. So we get $400,000 a year from the Port of Nanaimo instead of getting property taxes from them. And we put that into something that we call deferred revenue in accounting terms. Now, even though it has a different accounting treatment, it doesn't show up in our reserve balances, you probably would think of it as the same thing. It's a pot of money we set aside for future expenditures. And it's a pot that we tend to allocate to waterfront kinds of expenditures. There's roughly $2 million in there right now, if you include the money that we will get for 2014. And the projects that I would say are currently being contemplated are the Departure Bay Walkway and the Nanaimo Yacht Club sidewalk. Those two projects could eat up most of that funding fairly quickly. And personally, I also think that we should consider using some of this funding for work that we do on the Wilcox yard in the area. But those are decisions the council will make as part of the budget process. The other pot of money that we have set aside that isn't always visible is the development contributions. So we get various contributions for a broad variety of projects. Many of them are parks related, usually as a result of development. So when a developer makes a contribution, it goes into this pot of money, usually for a specific project. Right now there's about $340,000 in that pot, and they all have different and varying uses, and we'll bring them forward when those projects proceed. Your Worship, that's all I have for my presentation. There, as I said, most of this information is also in the written report.
Okay, I've got a couple of questions from council. I have one myself. The PILTs, the payments in lieu of taxes that come from the Port Authority, is there a contractual agreement as to when that is paid? Is it the first of the year or 1st of June, or is there an established date for that payment?
Your Worship, I don't recall specifically. I don't think there is a date in the agreement. If I remember correctly, we often get paid in August but I don't know that, I can't remember there being any specific written date.
So the PILTs haven't been paid to date, at
They
least
have
for
not been,
2014?
as far as I know, they have not been paid this year.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Johnstone.
Thank you, Your Worship. The strategic priority asset management has been, you're making the recommendation that $1.3 million be transferred to fund this project. Is it a coincidence that that is exactly the same as the interest? We gained 1.3% or $1.3 million in interest, and it's 1.3 going back into asset management.
Thank you, Your Worship. No, that is completely a coincidence. So maybe I can explain a little bit because it didn't really come out directly. That we have one reserve that is currently part of our statutory reserves. It's called the Local Improvement Reserve Fund. It has, at the beginning of the year, it had about $1.3 million in it. No, sorry, about $1.5 million in it. And it was set up, it was set up so long ago that we can barely find records to do with it. It was set back up in the 60s. And it has received some contributions over the years and has slowly grown. It was supposed to be used to fund local improvements. And I don't know if any of the council members who are currently on council have probably never been involved in a local improvement. I think we did our last one about 15 years ago.
Diane?
And they have not been proceeding. So as staff, we think it probably makes more sense to use that money for other capital purposes. And I think that the best use that we could possibly have for that money would be put it into the Asset Management Reserve Fund and use it to fund and to replenish and rebuild assets within the city.
Thank you.
Councillor Patchy.
Thank you, Worship. My question, the first one I have too, has actually been answered with the Local Improvement Reserve. I think Mr. Boland over the years has expressed quite a considerable interest in doing things out of the Local Improvement Reserve. And why would that not have been? There were opportunities.
We've had in the past a local improvement program, and essentially the way a local improvement program works is that if a local taxpayer in an area of the city, if their neighborhood wants to have some kind of improvements done to it that weren't going to be done by council, by the city, through sidewalks or street lights or whatever, that they could choose to pay a portion of that on their property taxes, and the city would fund a portion and the taxpayers would fund a portion. And there was formulas that were set up for doing that. It's not been successful. I would say that it's not been successful because I think most people are generally happy with the services in their neighborhood, or at least they're not so unhappy that they're willing to pay anything additional above their taxes to get those services. And
follow up, Your Worship,
yes.
with me. The payment in lieu of taxes that the Port Authority pays to the city, $400,000 a year. How is that amount arrived at, and how often is it reviewed?
It was arrived at through negotiation, I believe. I wasn't part of those negotiations. It's not related to the assessed values of their properties, although I would say that it would be difficult to do because I don't think that the assessed values of their properties necessarily accurately reflect the taxable values. When you get something that's owned that's not used for tax purposes, it doesn't get a lot of review by BC Assessment. So I would be.
Would you know how long ago that was negotiated?
I don't remember. 2017. Ted says it's available for renew in 2017.
Yeah, it would be probably around 2002 to 2003. No, before that, it certainly wasn't done after 2003.
Maybe time to review?
Well, I think, Mr. Swaby, you may want to comment. I think there is a statutory period of time on it, and I think the review is probably 2 or 3 years away.
Your Worship, certainly, I think I believe it's 2017, the expiry, and at that time, we'll be back to the table to talk about what rate.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Brennan.
This may have been covered off with Councillor Padgey's question, but has the amount ever increased since for the PILTs?
Your Worship, I'm not aware of the rate ever having been changed.
Yes, I think that I was on council when it was first sat, and that would have been in the term beginning 2002, and it has in my memory was it was 400,000 then. So I'm wondering whether it might be useful to put this question on an agenda with the Port Authority tripartite, is it? Or not the tripartite one, just the NPA and the city on that committee? Or
The
would that,
Port Liaison Committee.
yeah, would that be an item that might be on there? Or would it be better to ask staff for a report on how?
Well, Your Worship, all of the above, but I think it might be just a little too premature at this time. But we anticipate certainly in 2016 to be starting to talk about it.
Okay, well, so long as it's on an agenda to review that amount, because that's now more than, well, it's probably around 10 years or so. Thank you.
Okay. I was going to comment that I was on the other side of the fence for negotiations, but I've decided not to make a comment after all. Okay, the Councillor Brennan has done that. Okay, second.
Also receive the information.
Okay. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Mr. Clements. Very interesting indeed. The VIEX and Pacific Sports grants, purpose to obtain council's approval for 2 grant requests for 2014 and to identify funding sources for both grants.
Move staff's recommendation, Your Worship.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Moving into the operating results for the period ending 2014 June 30th. Purpose is to present a summary of operating results for the period ending that date, 2014 June 30. Mr. Clements, are you going to do that, or is that...
Your Worship, this report was generated by my
Just
department
received.
and my staff, but I don't propose to go through it in detail. If the council has any questions, I'd be happy to try and answer them.
Okay. Councillor Brennan? Sorry. Let's move in second. No discussion. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Quarterly direct award purchases. Purpose to report direct award purchases made by staff during the 3-month period ending 2014 June 30th as per bylaw 7175. And the staff recommendation is to receive, council receive the information.
Question?
And that's it. So do you want to, did you have a question?
Question on that?
Yep. Do you want to move it to put on the floor?
Okay, we'll move.
Councillor Brennan? Councillor Johnson? Okay, go ahead. Councillor Ratchey.
The 2 vendors that I mentioned in the staff report on page 116, Shanahan's and Raylec Power, where are they located? Are they local?
They're just... I actually don't know.
Raylec Power is a local firm. The second firm you're questioning?
Shanahan Limited Partnership, the first one.
Shanahan?
Stainless steel lockers.
I'm sorry, I don't have that information with me.
Okay.
You have an update for us?
Yeah, the update I could give you, I believe they're not a local firm. The existing lockers we have in our facilities are a standard product that they have supplied in the past, and therefore we're going to continue on using them because they have the same hardware and lock systems and such.
Okay. Thank you.
That's it.
Good. Thank you. So it's been moved and seconded. No further discussion. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Moving into community services, number 9A, South Fork Water Treatment Plant update. Purpose to provide council with... Sorry?
Sorry, Your Worship, we're going to do item P, quarterly single submission purchases.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. I missed that. Yes, sorry. So purpose is to report the single submission purchases made during that period. Staff recommendation received for information in the report.
Second.
Second. Discussion. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Community services, 9A South Fork Water Treatment Plant update. Purpose to provide council with and the community with an update to the status of the water treatment plant project. And there's a motion there to receive for information. Moved.
Second.
Second. No discussion. All those in favor? Oh, sorry, you have discussion?
I'd just like to make a comment if I can make
Please.
a short one, and to thank Mr. Sims once again for for escorting us on tours of the water treatment plant. It was really, really educational. It is totally complicated. Half of it I didn't understand, and I hope my questions were not too embarrassing. But one thing that I want to say is that a question was asked the previous day by Councillor Johnstone, and I happened to ask the same question the day when we were there about the spin-off to the local economy and the economic spin-off. And I just wonder if Mr. Sims could just maybe tell us a little bit about that, because it's important.
I saw the flinch.
Tell me.
Your Worship, I can start and Mr. Sims can join in, but as you saw in your quarterly single source report tonight, Archie Johnson, of course, there's a spin-off right there. They're a big part of the mechanical contract for this. We know that Canadian, the contractor, has used a lot of local labor in terms of the concrete forming. So it's huge in terms of the spin-off of this. And Mr. Sims, if you have anything you can add directly, it would be great.
Thank you, Your Worship. Of course, there's, as Mr. Swaby mentioned, there's a lot of local content. We estimate there's about 90% local, not only local firms, but as well local labor that have been hired directly by the general contractor, Canadian. So that's exciting. We observed that anywhere from 50 to 90 persons crawling over this site at any given day, depending on the activities of the day. And this is multi-million dollars that's being invested largely back into the community.
Councillor Johnson.
I was just going to add, Your Worship, it was gratifying to see all of the modulars there with the names of local firms. It's a huge contribution to our community, and well done and successful. You say that the change orders are 5% or less, and we're achieving that. So thank you so much for the hard work in that.
I might just have Councillor Bedge, you got a comment too to make? But before you do, it was a question.
I just found Mr. Sims' correspondence of last week, and there are some really interesting numbers here. Local stuff: engineering 9.2 million, total person hours expended 40,000. Prime consultant Levelton from Nanaimo, LGL from Nanaimo, Corson Associates from Parksville, Wilkie from Nanaimo, Acuren from Nanaimo, all local stuff. Pipeline installation $9 million, Napit Industry in Nanaimo. Total projected cost $49 million. Reinforcing steel, Harris of Nanaimo, Houle Electric of Nanaimo, Archie Johnston Plumbing and Heating of Nanaimo, Mako of Nanaimo, Napit again of Nanaimo. So it really goes to show you that a lot of the money stays with us.
Well, I just might comment, if I could, that, I really think we need to acknowledge the effort put in by our staff in handling all these things. I mean, I've had tours, and certainly Councillor Patchy and others had a recent tour on it. It's a massive undertaking, and, the expertise that I see, and I'm always amazed by from our own staff. Bill Sims is a wonderful example, but there's certainly other people that have also contributed hugely to the project and the other big projects, and I can tell you it's on behalf of Council, it's greatly appreciated. Very, very capable people. It's been moved and seconded but not voted. All those in favour? Opposed? Motion carries. Into partnership with BC Hydro, appliance rebate program. Purpose to obtain Council's approval for funding of a partnership with BC Hydro for a Power Smart appliance rebate program, energy and water efficient clothes washers.
Move staff's recommendation, Your Worship.
Okay, moved and seconded. Discussion? None. All those in favour? Opposed? Motion carries. Industrial development, pedestrian network requirements. Purpose to obtain Council approval to implement a new policy framework to develop pedestrian networks, including sidewalks, within new and existing industrial areas. Anyone want to? Councillor Greaves.
I'll move staff's recommendation that Council adopt a policy requiring the development of effective pedestrian networks, including sidewalks in industrial areas. Together, Your Worship, Siriana?
Yes, we can do them together.
Okay. Number 2, direct staff to prepare amendments to Building Bylaw 2003, number 5693, and Subdivision Control Bylaw 1989, number 3260, to require construction of sidewalks in conjunction with development of industrial zone parcels.
I'll second that.
Moved and seconded. Discussion. Councillor Patchy.
Question to Mr. Foy. I have some difficulty comprehending the necessity for a vast sidewalk network in an industrial area. Who's going to use it in an industrial area? And that's the first part of the question. The second one is, there are so many requirements all over town for additional sidewalks in places where they don't exist and they should exist. Hammond Bay is one of them. Priorities?
Absolutely. So the purpose of the report that or the purpose of modifying the bylaws would be to ensure that sidewalks were developed as part of future industrial development. So the choices about prioritization for the city's sidewalk infill program would be at the recommendation of staff and the direction of council through the budgeting process. So including sidewalks within future industrial developments won't necessarily move them up in priority for the city's sidewalk infill program, though we have seen some examples recently, particularly on Boxwood Road, where maybe that is perhaps an exception of a road where their council may feel or want to give direction on that as a priority. The second, just going back to your first question, I just wanted to note that if we think about what a traditional industrial development was like 20 years ago with large parcels, generally, manufacturing or other sort of traditional industrial type activities with very large lots, expensive to service, large parcel sizes, we can understand the rationale behind the original motion a number of years ago to exclude sidewalks from these types of developments. But industrial has sort of changed in nature, and we're seeing that more and more, particularly in the core part of the city, where we're seeing a greater mix of services. Parcel sizes are getting down to be a bit smaller, and I think the Boxwood area has sort of enshrined or sort of characterized that change, where you've got in some industrial uses, you've got some industrial/commercial uses mixed up in the same space, and you've also got residents who are just trying to walk through the space who, perhaps aren't actually working there, but are just trying to use that part of the network. If you look in the report, we have an exclusion that we recommended be kept for Duke Point, and that was specifically to deal with the fact that, yes, there are still pieces of our industrial land base which are that true heavy industrial large parcels where walking is not, just to walk to the next neighbor is sort of at the outer reach of a walking trip. So you're absolutely right. In that case, we're recommending just to leave the exemption in place. And if that land use changes in the future, we can reconsider at that time.
Just a comment then. Boxwood Road, I'm completely at ease with, because there is a fair bit of residential still there, and so that's not a problem. But are there other places, industrial places, other than Duke Point in the city where there is no residential? It's strictly industrial and commercial.
I think that most of the time you have residential and commercial is close enough to drive some pedestrian traffic. So if you think about the frontages along Northfield Road, there's still people walking there. There's residential across the street. I know that we've had discussions about streets like Boban, where you have employees of legitimately industrial buildings who are moving around seeking to access transit or service, or even to reach lunch. Who are asking, why do you have a sidewalk on Mostar, but we are sort of left out of that. So, over the years we've received lots of requests for sidewalks in this area, and this policy will ensure that future development or future redevelopment of industrial areas will proceed with that in place.
Thank you.
Mr. Sweeney, did you have a comment you were going to make?
No, that's good, Your Worship. Thank you.
You're on.
Sorry, Your Worship, it was already covered off.
I'm sorry.
Thank you.
I couldn't hear the response. Okay, Councillor Johnstone.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll be supporting this recommendation tonight because it's put forward and being fully endorsed by the Development Process Review Committee and the Transportation Advisory Committee. My only concern, and I'm pleased that heavy industrial areas are going to be exempted from from this requirement because of the nature of the heavy-duty equipment and whatnot. But when you prepare your report, Mr. Foy, will there also be some inclusion of what the maintenance costs may be for sidewalks? Because I'm sure that should be a factor. And we would be responsible. It wouldn't be the industries themselves maintaining these sidewalks. So that will be an ongoing cost to the taxpayers.
Absolutely. It's a trade-off, and actually one of the other things that we put in the report is that if someone is doing a large industrial development and they can come up with a comprehensive pedestrian plan, we have recommended the flexibility around just doing sidewalk on one side of the street. Again, trying to recognize that this is really a trade-off. The trade-off is that we have areas of town that have no pedestrian network at all, and that is leading to some challenges. On the other hand, everything that the council has identified as a concern in terms of picking up a bunch of extra new infrastructure is also something that we would like to avoid. So what we're trying to do is find a pragmatic middle ground where we develop a basic, minimal, functional pedestrian network, but we're not trying to develop sidewalks all over the place because we don't want to pick up all those additional maintenance costs.
Good, thank you.
Mr. Foy, just a quick question. At what point do you make the determination whether to use asphalt or cement?
So typically we always use concrete where we think it's going to be permanent or ultimate configuration, and we use asphalt where we think that it's being put in an interim location with a reasonable chance that in the medium term it's going to be relocated. Effectively, concrete lasts for a very, very long time, and if we're going to invest that amount of money, we want to make sure that we get at least a reasonable proportion of its total lifespan out of it.
Okay. Councillor Brennan.
Thank you, Your Worship. The thing that I particularly like about this is that it meshes quite well with the transportation plan that we've just adopted, insofar as it talks about there being sidewalk networks to so that you can have people bike to work, walk to work, take the transit, and then walk to the place. Because these urban industrial centers aren't way out in the boonies. They're in areas where people live, so people would use them to get from neighborhood to neighborhood, perhaps, or neighborhood to shopping. So I think that it's something whose time has come, and I support it quite strongly.
Okay, thank you. It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. And we now move into the item D, the 2014 Sport Tournament Grants Request, the final intake. And this is to be introduced by Parks, Recreation and Culture Commission Chair, Councillor Johnston.
Thank you, Worship. I'd like to move Commission's recommendation that Council, pending a review of the application by Vancouver Island Exhibition for the skateboard competition and roller derby demo and game, and in the event that no late applications are received, direct that the unexpended 2014 Sport Tournament grant funds be carried over to the 2015 Sport Tournament grant budget, and approve the expenditure of $8,625 for the final intake of the 2014 Sport Tournament grant allocation as follows. Do you want them read out, Your Worship?
I don't. Do we need the issues? I don't think it's quite a complex list.
Yeah, good. Thank you.
So you're going to move it and second it?
The question.
There are some questions too. I've got a question as well. And I wondered, Councillor Johnson, if you could explain number 9, the Nanaimo Ultimate Association.
The Utter Bowl?
Yes.
Well,
I assume there is an explanation involved here.
I'm going to let Director Harding explain that one.
It was an event that's already occurred. It was a late night event. That's Ultimate is the frisbee event that actually happens all across North America during that certain time of night, and it starts in Yellowknife, I believe, and works its way all the way down the coast. Councillor Greaves, I believe, sat on the committee reviewing that application. He can
Councillor Greaves?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, I see.
You won't utter a word.
Thank you very much. It's been moved and seconded. Let's move on. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. The travel assistance grant recommendations to be introduced by Parks, Recreation and Culture Commission Chair, Councillor Johnstone.
Thank you, Worship. Commission's recommendation is that Council approve the following applications for travel assistant grants to John Barsby Bulldog Theatre in the amount of $750. Should we just move the recommendations as presented?
Well, there's six.
There's six there.
Mr. Farrell?
Yeah, that's correct, Your Worship. You can just move recommendation as presented.
As presented. Thank you.
Moved and seconded. Okay, I see no discussion on those. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Request for approval in principle the Nanaimo Curling Club lease agreement to be introduced by Parks, Recreation and Culture Commission Chair, Councillor Johnstone.
Thank you, Your Worship. The purpose is to obtain Council's approval in principle to grant a 10-year lease to the Nanaimo Curling Club for the city-owned land and building known as the Nanaimo Curling Centre, located at 100 Wall Street. And the Commission's recommendation is that Council provide approval in principle to grant a 10-year lease to the Nanaimo Curling Club and direct staff to publish a notice of disposition as required under Section 26 and Section 94 of the Community Charter.
And we can do them together again as a block. Councillor Brennan. Moved. You moved it, and Councillor Brennan second. Discussion on that. Councillor Patchy.
A question to Mr. Harding, if I may. Correspondence came in today asking if we had an idea about how much our responsibility of servicing that building might cost. Could you elaborate a little bit about that?
Sorry, Worship. Similar to any of our buildings, we'll do assessments of them. So what this requirement would be with anything to do with the roof and the outside of the building. So at this point in time, we'd have to work and see how the roof life is. It hasn't had a new roof for quite a few years, but it still seems, what we've seen, it still seems quite sound. As the report mentions, it would also be a cost-sharing venture with the curling club, or can be. So we'd work with the curling club over the next few years of working out any kind of capital improvements, and any of those projects would have to be presented to council either with request for cost sharing or as a priority as you look at any of our priorities throughout the community.
Okay. And one follow-up on a slightly different track. Why was the question as to who owned the building in the first place? I'm still somewhat mystified by that.
Yeah, I think it's one of those, it was just an older type of thought of when this was built way back in the 60s. People have this feeling that it was owned by the club. It's just one of those thoughts, as many people in different buildings and different parkland over years. Sometimes they feel that there's an ownership to it, but as you look into it, it's really, if it's on a dedicated parkland, really there's ownership cannot be transferred.
Thanks.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded again. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Moving into Parks, Recreation and Culture Commission minutes. Did you want to move the minutes?
Your Worship.
Second. Moved and seconded. Discussion. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Bylaws, there are none. Correspondence not related to a report to council. We have a letter from Mr. Leon Davis, manager, BC SPCA in Nanaimo and District Branch, requesting that council consider the capital grant of $150,000 to $200,000 over 3 years to be applied to construction costs for the new BC SPCA Nanaimo Regional Community Animal Centre. And we do have a delegation tonight, Mr. Leon Davis. Mr. Davis, welcome, sir.
Worship Council, thank you for listening to me today. I finally got here. I'm here to present to you a project that the community and the SPCA have been working on for some time now, and we're at a stage now where we are confidently about to move forward into a situation where we'll be tendering the contract for construction, hopefully. The Nanaimo Regional Community Animal Centre project is a new shelter in Nanaimo at 154 Westwood Road to replace the current operation at 2200 Labio. So let's get started. In the history of Nanaimo, we've been here for almost, I think, 100 years now. The SPCA was first formed in response to the pit ponies that used to drag out the coal from the mines. And local residents were a little concerned about the conditions of that, so they formed a very early branch in BC of the SPCA and advocated for their working conditions to be improved through more breaks, water, and they were quite successful. I think we were about the fourth or fifth SPCA branch to be formed in BC. And we existed like that without a building for decades until the 1970s, where we were in where the City Pound is now. And we stayed there for, I think, about 15 years until we finally built a small house at Labio Road in the early 1980s. And we've been there for 35 years. It's been a long time. And if you have walked in there, you'll know how long it's been with how the building's holding up. So 2 years ago, we were informed by the city that the lease there would not be renewed because of planned construction. I panicked initially and then thought, wait, this might be an opportunity for something fantastic. So for about a year and a half after that, we formed a committee and we completed a feasibility study to see if we were going to be financially able to do this. And at first we thought maybe not, and we considered having a smaller building with limited services, possibly servicing only cats, because we see that as Nanaimo's largest animal control concern that isn't addressed in the bylaws is actually cats. We have some 350 stray cats come into our building every year, which the current contractor wouldn't be able to handle. So we thought we can't leave Nanaimo with 350 stray cats coming in, and that's not even close to what they have. There's other organizations that help us deal with that. So we thought we've got to at least have a small shelter. Our feasibility study showed that support for a shelter that only serviced cats with so many dog lovers in Nanaimo probably wouldn't be great for raising money. So we looked at the social need as well, and I'll talk in a minute about some of the humanitarian outreach projects that we do. And there was just too much need in Nanaimo for us to consider not being here, which was seriously on the table for a while. We considered moving animals south to Cowichan and north to Parksville. But our committee decided that we couldn't. We needed to find a way forward. So here I am. And there is the beautiful little building that has served us so well for so long. I'll miss her, but not much. So quickly what we do on the animal side of things, a lot of people know, but I just thought it might be interesting currently. 1,300 abused, neglected, and abandoned animals come through our door each year. 250 complaints of neglect or cruelty is second only to and sometimes beats Victoria and the Capital Regional District. At least 100 of these a year. Really frustrating. You've seen this in the news a lot. And I must say local RCMP and Coastal Animal Services have been a great help. We've been all working together to deal with this. Even though it's not a part of your contractor's contract to do that, they have been wonderful. 450 requests for financial assistance from people looking for help with spay or neuter or medical bills. We don't do that. We do try and find assistance working with local vets for people if we can. Compassionate boarding, that's something that we do a lot, which I'll talk about a little bit more in depth later. And compassionate euthanasia. Vet bills can be expensive, and quite often when your animal's reached the end of life, you can't afford the euthanasia bills. We will work it we don't actually euthanize animals at the Nanaimo SPCA. We do work with local vets to do that, but we will work with the owner and the vets to find a way, usually free, to bring that about. We have 8 staff, but 100 volunteers. Provincially, the SPCA has 400 staff and 4,000 volunteers, so we do rely on volunteers incredibly. We just couldn't do what we do without Nanaimo volunteers. They're a wonderful bunch of people, and they have kept me sane over the last 5 years, I will admit. Each year, about $92,000 we spend of donor money spaying and neutering companion animals. $73,000 on veterinary bills. Our operating expenses are about $750,000 annually, not including our cruelty investigations, and that completely comes from donor money and fees, adoption fees. We don't receive any municipal or provincial funding for that at all, so the community comes out. It's an incredible amount. It's $2,000 a day. Comes purely from the people in Nanaimo. So this is the most important thing, I think, that we do. Arguably, everybody knows that we are cats and dogs and puppies and cruelty investigations, but what's closest to my heart, and I think the most important thing to the city, is the social programs and the outreach that we do. People don't realize that animals people do realize that, but sometimes when you're looking at animal charities, they don't realize that we are also a people charity. Animals and people have been interwoven since time immemorial, and you can't help one without helping the other. So some of the social programs in Nanaimo that I think are really important. Haven House. We have a partnership with Haven House, which works to get ladies who are victims of domestic violence out of that situation. The Violence Link study shows that ladies will often stay if they think that a pet is going to take the brunt of this abuse if they were to leave. So we work with Haven House to get the clients out, so often their children, and we will take the pet on free of charge, make sure that that pet is taken care of, and then when the family or the ladies are safe and secure, we will return the pet to them. There's no other safety net for people at risk in that situation. We work really closely with John Howard. It's a fantastic program. Young children who have been naughty and we want to keep out of the penal system will sometimes be ordered to do volunteer work, and we do daily volunteer John Howard youth. Some of them are fantastic. They all deserve a second chance. Some of them are challenging, but it's a really important and wonderful program to be able to be involved in. We also offer the same for adults in the Restorative Justice Program. I won't say our low-income spay and neuter fund because this really does belong to the city. Council has kindly funded this every couple of years for the last 10 years or so. Nanaimo is a shining example in the province of this. The BCSPCA's most recent 5-year strategic plan is really to address the plight of cats. It's something that is huge in BC, and it's something that municipalities often don't have bylaws for. And it's shown because the dog situation has really gotten a lot more under control, whereas the cats are exploding. So all of the shelters are looking towards the municipalities to help fund something like this, and Nanaimo has been used as a template on how something like that can work. We spay and neuter about 500 companion animals for low-income residents of Nanaimo every year. We administrate the program free of charge, and the city and one private donor provide the rest of the money for that fund. Biannually, the city has given us between $15,000 and $25,000, but we don't touch any of that for operations. It purely goes back to the veterinarians in town for the low-income owners of pets. Compassionate emergency boarding, we work with VHA, psychiatric nurses, social services, people who have experienced medical crises, mental health crises, fires in their home, floods often are at a loss when they have nowhere to take their pets. We're told again and again by VHA how appreciative they are of the fact that when somebody is suffering a mental or medical crisis, that their healing can be really impeded by the fact that they're worried about what's happening to their pets. So we will offer free boarding for those pets until they are able to come and regain them. Addictions recovery, we work with people in addictions recovery programs. Once they reach a certain point, they come and take part in a volunteer program. It really gives them a sense of worth. It gets them back out doing something. It's a little bit like work. It gets them feeling like they're giving back, and I think that's a really important program. It can be a challenge sometimes, but I've met some wonderful people who have some great success stories coming through that program. Opportunities for volunteers of developmental delays. We have some of our best volunteers are developmentally delayed, and they are the most wonderful people I've had the opportunity to work with, and they work harder than I do, and I work pretty hard. Pet food donations, Salvation Army. So we supply the Salvation Army with food for people who can't afford to feed their pets. It's amazing how many people have to make that decision monthly between shopping for their children and shopping for their pets. They don't want to give up the pets. They're not really allowed to give up the children. So we like to take that decision away from them and provide them with some food for their pets. We love our kids in Nanaimo. We have probably close to 2,000 kids in our kids club in Nanaimo. They sign up to the kids club after coming in and donating money. Lemonade stands. I had a couple of young kids last week come in and they've raised $500 selling lemonade. I don't know how they'd done that or what they were putting in their lemonade, but it must have been good. We have our Bark magazine that kids receive, which is a really fun magazine, and it kind of teaches kids about humane treatment of animals and just interesting facts. We give this out as much as we can at as many events as we can. It's great. We have an Animal Sense, which is an adult one, but Bark is amazing. Our summer camps. for kids. We run those and we run workshops throughout the year. They're really popular. We're hoping with a new shelter we'll be able to really expand our education program, because right now we can't actually host children in the shelter. It's too small. It upsets the kids, it upsets the animals. So we have some specific, I'll show you in a minute, ideas about how to grow that program. We provide teachers' packs to schools so that teachers can have a syllabus for humane education. And we raised last year over $10,000 in donations from children who were having their birthday, and in lieu of presents asked for donations to go towards the SPCA, and that's amazing. Only 4 years ago that was about $250 in a year, and it's gone up in 4 years to $10,000. Our cruelty investigations, I won't dwell too long on this, and I didn't pick any horrible pictures for you, but I think it's important. 250 reports a year, that's a lot. 7,000 across the province. We have three constables who cover the Mid and North Island, and it's not a lot. Molly, well, I remember her a few months ago. She actually came from Port Hardy, and it's actually a testament to Nanaimo. Our shelter really is a hub on the island for cruelty investigations. We have trained local veterinarians who are trained in forensics. So a lot of animals we do get from other municipalities, other areas where there aren't SPCAs. As a part of this project, we actually are approaching some other regional areas to help us because of that. Molly was left on a porch, and an RCMP officer was called out, and she was hours away from death. We thought we'd lose her. We got her transported down here to Nanaimo, got her to Island Veterinary Hospital, actually, who took wonderful care of her. Thanks to our donors, our ability to save animals that require this level of intervention is why I love working here. This is Molly now at Christmas, and her wonderful Nanaimo foster, Linda. Molly won Animal Hero of the Year in the province this past AGM. And there she is with her new brothers. Nanaimo specifically, King was a difficult one for us. King was attacked by the owner's boyfriend in Nanaimo and beaten with a hammer. We were called out and our constables intervened. And I think this kind of case shows how important it is for the SPCA to be here to identify abusers in the community. So often there is a clear violence link between people abusing animals and then escalating to abusing people. And often when we go into homes, we reveal other horrible situations that are going on, which require us to involve other agencies and the Ministry of Children and Family and stuff like that. And I love the fact that we can be that kind of social safety net as well. King also had a happy ending. This is him now. And the person who perpetrated this crime actually did go to prison, received a lifetime ban on owning animals, and no longer lives in Nanaimo. Thank goodness.
Okay, Mr. We'll have to move along fairly quickly.
Yes, okay.
So 3.5 minutes over.
The current shelter is over 3 decades old. It's small, it's narrow, its kitchen area is shared with animals and with the staff and volunteers. Lots of the cages are made of wood. The dog kennels face each other, which is not wonderful for dogs when they're a little bit scared, and our sitting room, standing room only foyer is not nearly big enough. Maple Ridge, we built this 2 years ago, just to give you an idea of the kind of things that we're looking at constructing. It's a beautiful facility. It's open, it's welcoming. The floors are polished concrete, really good for biosecurity. The dog kennels are very modern and large and allow for the best welfare that can be given. There are separate rooms for food preparation and for laundry. Areas for adoption counseling, and something the staff and volunteers will love, an actual staff room. This is the building site at 154 Westwood Road. It's 12 acres. It's separated by the Millstream River, which we are going to leave alone. We're going to build more in the north so we don't have to impact any of the really rich riparian areas that are down there. We'll be doing a lot of replanting. It's on the parkway. We have a wonderful landscape architect, Victoria Drakeford, who has experience in the parkway, so we're really going to be adding a lot, I think, to the beauty of the parkway. There'll be large trails for people, a large off-leash dog park available to the public. The outside, low rise, lots of wood, metal, glass. Like I said, I really want to really fit in with some of the beautiful buildings that have been going up in Nanaimo. So real West Coast is what we're looking for. About 2,000 square feet in the building now, going up to about 7,500 square feet with a large multi-purpose room, and that's what I'm talking about for our school educational visits and our outreach. We can do a lot of programs, fundraisers, functions in there, and also I'm thinking that we can offer it to other charities who might need a place to go. So, This is the last slide, but one. 2.7 million is the estimated complete total bill to completion. Donations to the building fund since 2003 from the public, 781,000. Recent donations, that's just changed in the last 2 weeks. I've raised $120,000 just from local businesses and leadership gifts. Our request from the city is to consider being attached to this project and investing in it for about $150,000 to $200,000 spread out over 3 years. That's not per year. That would enable us to confidently move forward in August to a tender situation, and we would be able to then break ground before the end of the year. And may I just say one quick thing? In all of the years of capital projects the BCSPCA has taken on, I have been told that working with the city staff in Nanaimo has been the most pleasant, easiest, and helpful experience they have ever had. So I said I would pass that on. Thank you. Good.
Thank you, Ms. Davis. There'll probably be some quiz. Mrs. Swaby, your light was on. Did you have a comment? No? Okay. Your light is now off. Councillor Padgett.
Thank you, Worship. Thank you, Mr. Davis, very much, and thank you for your patience. This is your third attempt to come and speak to us, I believe.
You guys have been busy, I understand.
Can you talk a little bit about duplication between yourself and the city pound? Is there a way of combining services?
Sure. So you do have that Maple Bridge facility was actually built 50% the city, 50% the SPCA. They also provide that contract for animal control, and in Nanaimo there is a Coastal Animal Services who provide that contract. We don't deal with stray dogs, which is quite primarily what Coastal Animal Services does. If we get any stray dogs brought into the SPCA, we actually call them and they come and pick them up. Stray cats, free-living cats, like I said, Coastal don't have the resources to take on all of that, and we do somehow, thanks to a lot of foster people. Is there a model for the future? Absolutely. There's other municipalities, and several of them in BC, which have, Comox would be an example. So Comox has the kenneling contract for dogs and cats in the municipality, and the city hires animal control officers who bring the animals there, and then the fees are all paid back, are taken at the SPCA and paid back to the city. That's something that we certainly would be happy to look at in the future. This building will be built in such a way that we would be able to extend and add extra kennels if we wanted to look at that.
Can I have a follow-up, Mr. Chair? Yes. You have a lot of land. Do you need all of it?
12 acres. Do we need all of it? What we're looking at after we finish building this, and I won't be coming back to ask for more money for that, is something we don't have in the Mid-Island, which is land for large animal seizures. The plight of horses and other livestock that are abused and neglected is difficult and can be quite expensive. We have to pay for them to be boarded at private places quite often. So we are looking towards using the proportion of that land for live animals, or large animals, sorry.
Mr. Chair, that was my question for Mr. Davis. I intend to make a motion afterwards, but we'll need to wait till there's 5 of us, I imagine, before I do
Yes,
that.
we have a couple more speakers as well. Certainly. Councillor Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Davis. You finally had a chance to present to us. Being the information here is a little bit stale, you had raised personally $87,000 at the time of this letter of request. Has that changed?
Yes, I'm now at $120,000.
Fantastic.
Thank you to a wonderful gentleman who said I could name him. His name's Hans Nielsen, gave me a $10,000 check just before the last council meeting. We've had some great companies. The ones that I can name, Budget Car and Rental gave us $25,000. Steve Marshall Ford, $25,000. Island Veterinary Hospital, $20,000. About $50,000 in private donations. We're not in a capital campaign right now. It's more of a leadership phase, but it's been incredibly encouraging.
Good, thank you. And you and I had met previous, and I keep thinking that there's a great opportunity, especially with the amount of land that you have acquired, to develop and working in conjunction with the city a pet cemetery. I think there's an opportunity to have a huge fundraising opportunity through Pet Cemetery. I'm familiar with one in the Lower Mainland that my past cousin had a partnership in, and it was a very, very lucrative
Yes, and we are looking at, this is going to be a larger building, and it's going to cost more money to staff and to run. So we're looking at a lot of different ways for social enterprise. So one of the things we're looking at is a pet memorial garden. Mm-hmm. We have a dog wash that you can come and use yourself, a large off-leash dog park, which will be members only. So people can actually, that money will go back to the SPCA, and it can be actually managed, which I know a lot of people have concerns. It's difficult sometimes when you have someone's dog who is running around chasing your dog and there's no one there. So there's a few avenues, and yeah, a pet memorial or graveyard or memorial center will be one of them.
That's good. Thank you very much.
You know, I'm just going to mention that I have been obviously at the SPCA several times, and my cat was adopted from there. And I have a complaint. No, I don't.
Okay.
It's,
now's a good time.
No. It's a wonderful cat. It's a wonderful cat.
Spoiled.
It's spoiled rotten. But the other point is, when I was there, I did have a bit of a tour, and really, the building is showing its age. I can see that. The staff, I have to commend you on. I know a large number of them are volunteers, but you also have a base of around 8 full-time employees. And everyone I was in contact with, they were absolutely first class, very friendly, supportive, helpful in every way they could be. So, I mean, it's a great facility, and I hope that there's a way found to work with you, because I think it's certainly worthwhile for our community.
Thank you.
Councillor Brennan.
Thank you, Your Worship. I like this project. I like that it has a public safety aspect and a public health aspect, and social programs that are really important to our community. I think we need our staff to look at our budget and assist us in figuring out ways that we can participate. So I'd like to ask for staff to report back to council on the feasibility of such an investment in a new BC SPCA facility.
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion on that? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries.
Worship, Council, thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Davis. Okay, council appointments, there are none. Notice of motion, anyone?
No, but I have...
Other business, anyone?
Sorry, Your Worship. I would like to advise you and council that I will be taking a leave from my duties.
Okay.
From tomorrow, July 23rd, to September 1st inclusive. I'm having knee replacement surgery tomorrow, and my doctor suggests a recovery period of 3 to 4 months. I think that's more than I would expect. I'd like to be able to participate after a much shorter leave, but I will provide you with a written notice of my leave.
Thank you, Councillor Brennan. Well, on behalf of council, I certainly wish you well and I know you've suffered from the situation with your knee, and I'm hoping that it'll be totally successful and give you quality of life back again, would you?
Me too.
Thank you very much. Now, any other business? And then we have a delegation not related to report to council for 10 minutes. Mr. Christopher Much. Is Mr. Much here?
Getting faster. Graham was
Welcome, sir.
the same guy as me. So they said it was good.
My name is Christopher Trail, Protection Island. I'm speaking in regards to LeaderCast of May 5th, and I go to church, not every Sunday, but most Sundays, and I enjoy the sermons. I look at it like my cosmic battery charge. Our pastor, he's got a pretty predictable message, and the message is love. Love of God, love your neighbor as you love yourself. Go out into the community and lead by example. Don't preach, and certainly don't judge. And one of the hardest ones is forgiveness. You might have noticed the scars on my face. I was born with something called a cleft palate. That combined with the fact that at 16 years old, I weigh 460 pounds, I was a target, to say the least. It was dark days for me. And I learned a secret from the big guy. It was the art of forgiveness. And it sounds kind of corny, but it frees you. And you realize that 90% of the people out there, they're good people. And they just get caught up in a moment, and they forget the social skill of empathy. And they truly forget the power that words have, as we are all very well aware of. And the one thing I was hoping to bring to council was that maybe as a community that it's time to forgive. And it's time to move forward in one consistent voice on two messages. One, Nanaimo is not just a city of tolerance. It is a city that celebrates in a truly Canadian fashion all religions, all races, and all sexual orientations. I love this city. The other thing that got lost in this whole mess is that the city of Nanaimo is open for business without any question whatsoever. We are welcoming. We have one of the most diverse and technologically advanced cities in all of Canada. We had NASA here a week or two ago looking at one of our robotics firms. And pretty much in conclusion, what I would like to say is that there's one group that's been forgotten. And can you put that up, please? There have been over 10 times the city of the population of Nanaimo that have been wounded, knifed, shot, and died for what's happened here, lest we forget. And lest we forget. And I would like to pose a very simple question to council. Are we starting to forget? It's fairly simple in that. And I would like to point out the irony that this whole thing was started on a forum on leadership. And it's not a dig against you. People make mistakes. Good leaders learn from their mistakes, and they incorporate it, and they move forward, and they add that to their portfolio, and they make good decisions. So I would like to, for our veterans who paid in blood, that we just don't give the rights that they died for at the stroke of a pen. So thank you very much for Council and Mayor.
Very good points. I think, Councillor Brennan, do you have a comment?
I just wanted to thank you for your message of forgiveness. I think that's important. So thank you very much for taking the time to come here and talk to us.
Okay, thank you.
No, very good point. And I just want to add to, at least we forget for the veterans in particular, but for everyone and for all causes. And your points were very well taken and very well spoken, incidentally. But I have a soft spot. My grandfather was killed in action in the First World War and will not forget. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, we're into question period now, number 16.
My name is Fred Taylor, and I'm wondering when staff are looking at the proposals for SPCA, if we could gain knowledge as to what's happening to the other part of the farm that's behind BC Hydro and where that money is going, because I think it would be a good chunk of money to build their premises, because it's in, I understand, BC SPCA name at this time, but I think the money should remain in Nanaimo to help their project. And also with staff could bring to you the history of the bidding on our animal control project contract in the past, because I have no problem that the SPCA could combine it, but we seem to find cheaper or lower price bidding in the past. And I think that needs to be before council for information as to the whole picture.
Okay, thank you. Good point.
Robert Fuller, 3350 Hammond Bay Road. I would have waited until Mr. Bestwick's notice of motion went forward, but seeing as it may go in camera and all of that, I have a few questions with the leadership cancellation right now. Is there, at this present time, as of today, any ongoing litigation concerning the LeaderCast cancellation and the aftermath against either the city or Vancouver Island Conference Centre?
Well, I can only speak for the city's part of it, and the answer is no. I'm not aware of any litigation whatsoever. maybe staff have a comment on that, possibly not. But I'm not aware of any litigation whatsoever, sir.
Thank you. Has the VICC had any conferences and or events canceled as to the LeaderCast cancellation?
I don't, it's run by Adlific. I'm not aware of any myself, but that's something that they would have to answer, whether it had some. I'm not aware of it.
Okey-dokey, and one more. Prior to Council's cancellation of LeaderCast on May the 5th, had the management of VICC, in concert with any other party, talked about this cancellation and or canceled the telecast prior to Mr. Patchy's motion on the 5th of May?
I'm not sure I understand the question, sir. Sorry. Are you talking about Adlific again? I'm not sure you understand what you're saying.
There has been rumors circulating in the press, and I've heard councillors say it as well, that prior to Mr. Patchy's motion, that the conference or that the telecast had been canceled previous to that.
I'm not aware of that. I might just add at this point, we've had discussions with the Nanaimo Daily News, and we haven't got a timeline finalized, but Mr. Nicholson, who's the publisher, is working with us at the city to rebroadcast the...
I understand that.
Okay, well, that's all I'm telling you.
If it is found out that the LeaderCast telecast had been canceled previous to Mr. Patchy's motion, I would ask Council to please remove the taxpayers' cost to this whole mess to be applied to the management costs of the folks that are given the task of managing the VICC, if that is the case.
Okay, sir.
Because the taxpayers shouldn't pay for it, period. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ron Boland, 3165 King Richard Drive. Is this not a new microphone I see before me? And if so, I would like to thank people for making something that's a little easier to use than the previous one. So thanks to staff for taking care of that. I can't quite let the local improvement program go by without further comment. I hate to see that program go because I believe it is a mix of local residents and improvements to the city, which if split, the cost is split between them, is a reasonable proposition. To find that the program is said to have failed because people decided they didn't want to pay for any improvements is not necessarily a failure of the program, but certainly a failure of people who to want to pay for something if they think maybe they're going to get it for free. I believe that the last budget I saw, we had sums of money in the $2 million or more range for putting in sidewalks. So we are putting them in for free for some people, and how that decision gets made, who gets them and who doesn't, is beyond me. But I think it's a program that can be saved, should be saved. And in that same thought, I don't know whether that extended to industrial properties. I heard someone say that many of these industrial sites wanted sidewalks. Seems to me a perfect application for this kind of a program. So think it over before you trash it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
To your motion
The committee be closed to the public in order to deal with the agenda items under the Community Charter, Section 9.1, C, I, and N, and the Community Charter 90, in brackets 2, 1A, and 1G.
Seconder for that, Senator. All those in favor? Opposed? We stand adjourned and in camera now.